Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit like, follow, or subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on. You can also check out my work at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com, for exclusive hard rock and heavy metal interviews, live show coverage, album reviews, and more. My guest for episode 212 is frontman MICHAEL Ferentino of Love in Reverse. Love in Reverse just released their latest album, Amygdala, through Data Drumming Records. MICHAEL Ferentino also has his hand in a good amount of other projects. We talk about them and Love in Reverse and everything in between. And here's MICHAEL Ferentino to tell you more about it. I've asked you this question before in the past, but if I knew absolutely nothing about Love in Reverse, how would you describe the band's music to me?
I would say it's sort of like a sonic adventure that's influenced by everything from classic rock to post-punk bands like Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, and a little bit forward-thinking with technology, but we like to put a lot of twists and turns and base most of the stuff on songs, like melodies and whatnot.
Love in Reverse is still made up of the same trio, yourself, Andres, and Dave, correct?
Yes, sir.
You guys recently released your latest album on August 16th. It's called, correct me if I'm wrong, Amygdala.
Amygdala.
Close enough.
Very close and perfect, yes.
Why don't you tell me the story behind the album title first?
So I'm actually... I went to school as a neuroscience major and got my bachelor's in behavioral neuroscience. So I have a little bit of a obsession with the brain and the central nervous system and all that good stuff. The amygdala is a part of the brain that is responsible for the fight or flight response. So a lot of the songs on this album were songs about fear, depression, personal demons and things like that. So I wanted to have a title that kind of reflected the vibe of that.
Outside of the music, are you working in that field that you have your degree in?
I actually work in the field of orthopedic medicine. So, I did work. I actually was a first assist for brain and spine surgery for 7 years. And, did all the closings and, all the morning rounds and all the calls with the nurses and taking care of all the patients' calls and whatnot. And now I do more of an orthopedic, trauma kind of stuff.
This release is digital only. There's no physical form of it. From what I understand, it's because this album wasn't exactly the original plan. You had one plan for a regular album and you ended up going with this. Why is that?
So initially we recorded an album called Keep Upright. It's kind of an homage to the classic rock bands we grew up on, including Kiss, which I see in the background there. And so we had a really cool album cover and a whole concept for the way this was going to be presented in a beautiful orange marble album and everything. But the prices of everything right now are just astronomical that the label wants to wait, see what happens in the beginning of the year. And they're actually saving money to do it no matter what. I told them my birthday is in January. If you could do it for that, that would be awesome. So that's the plan there. So in the meantime, Andres and I had been working on some tracks that we had written way back in the late 90s when we were at Warner Brothers. I had demoed these songs, and Andres always wanted to do like a full production of them. And then I had written a number of songs that were kind of in the vein of the rest of that stuff recently. So it's like, why don't we start working on these things while we're waiting on this other album, see what happens with it, and we'll at least get something out there. And I almost wish that we were holding this one off for a vinyl release because I'm really proud of the way it came out, but that's all right.
That's funny that you mentioned the 90s because I certainly got that feel from it. Like Orgy meets The Cure as far as the sound's concerned, a lot darker than your last album as far as musical compositions.
Yeah, absolutely. A darker side, more getting back to the use of electronics for the past album, the one that you heard, Fake It, that album, we kind of stripped everything down to just drums, bass, guitar, very minimal electronic stuff in the background. But our heart has always been in the mixture of both. I was more of a metalhead than Andres back in the day. I was a big metal fan, probably, way up there with the likes of the artists that you often have on your shows, Big Sabbath, Dio, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica. In fact, my manager was Johnny Z from Megaforce Records for a long time there during the Love and Reverse days, and we became really good friends all the way up to the day he died. I was on the phone with him all the time.
Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the songs from the new album? You haven't released any singles that I saw, so why don't we start with the opening track, Year of the Dog?
Sounds good.
Why don't you tell me a little bit what inspired that? I was reading the lyrics and I'm like, I don't have a clue.
Yeah, so Year of the Dog, I mean, it's based on the concept of the Chinese calendar, the year of the certain type of animal. Dog was the original name of our band before we became Love and Reverse. That was our original name. When we got signed to Warner Brothers, they found out there was another artist that might have had rights to that name. So they said, instead of going into some kind of legal battle with this, let's just come up with another name for you guys. So interestingly, we chose one. I gave them a list of song titles from our band Dog, and Love and Reverse was one of the songs on our first Dog demo. And they loved that name. So they're like, we like that name if you're cool with using it. I was like, absolutely. It keeps everything kind of, cohesive. We kind of like the story, So, but the song lyrics are more about an observation of a declining society. Basically, that's what it's about.
Seems very timely.
Yeah.
The second song on the album, The Monkey, I believe this is about drug addiction. Yeah,
more alcohol addiction than drug addiction, but yes, it could relate to any kind of addiction depending on the listener, of course. But yeah, I used to have an issue with drinking some years ago, and now I'm definitely in control of that, thankfully. But at one point, I was going off the deep end a bit, so it was just reminiscing about those days, really.
So would you say from a lyrical standpoint that the new album's a bit autobiographical?
To some degree, yeah, I would definitely say that. Yeah, underneath this madness, Miracle Away, all these kind of things about seeing the world from a cynical perspective, which anybody who listens to any of my lyrics will know that I'm pretty much in line with people like Zappa, George Carlin, Johnny Lydon. Those are kind of my idols for lyrics and or think thoughts. I know George Carlin was always a really amazing writer and thinker.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about Satanic Panic? I feel like this has come up recently with some music performances that have been on TV as of late.
So Satanic Panic brings us back to that late 80s, I'm going to say, era where, the PMRC and all that stuff going on, where everything was, music is going to destroy your children, and everybody thought there were some satanic cabals going on, which a lot of it turned out to be nonsense, obviously. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing based on that. And I also wanted to do something that had that heavier dark side. And then Andres wanted to bring in more of the, almost like the Tangerine Dream kind of synths into it. So we kind of combined those two worlds. I was like, it's like influenced by black metal, though it's not as heavy as black metal by any means, but there's a black metal spirit in that song. And then a spirit of that Tangerine Dream, Depeche Mode kind of synthesis in there as well.
I could definitely hear what you were going for with a lot of this material, and you nailed it dead on with Depeche Mode and the bands of that. Like, is there another particular song that stands out for you? I know they're all your babies, but we talked about Year of the Dog, The Monkey, and Satanic Panic. You got to have another one you want people to kind of zip in.
Yeah, I'm going to say there's two on there that are my favorites, and one of them is Misanthropic Mornings, which is, basically I wrote that one during a period where I was going through a really rough personal thing in my family. And I would wake up each morning just dreading another day. And I needed to get those demons out on a song. So that's what that song's really about. But I love the melody, the way everything just came together just the right way for that song for me. And then the second one is One So Pretty, which, believe it or not, was a little bit influenced by that Amber Heard / Johnny Depp case, and then some of the allegations against Marilyn Manson, and kind of, and not that I was taking sides on anyone. I haven't. I wasn't there, so I don't know the real stories, but it could be actually seen from either side, really.
That was a crazy thing, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard thing, and the
Unbelievable
documentary that went along with it. It was just it's like a Hollywood movie.
Again, I've been talking about this a lot with some of my friends about how our society has turned into this weird, just big reality show. Everything from our politics to, even like people wanting to watch shows like My 600-Pound Life and Hoarders. I watched 1 or 2 episodes of each one just out of curiosity, and I was appalled that these poor people are actually just being exploited, and it's really sad to me. That's where we've gone all these years,
I don't think they think they're getting exploited. I think they're looking at it from a fame perspective, which isn't healthy either way.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope they're getting something more out of it. I mean, unfortunately, I keep hearing stories that one of these people died or that one died because, when you're at that point of addiction again, sometimes it's just, if you can't come back from it, it's brutal, and, take your life early.
The other thing I think that kind of contributes to where we are in society is that we're exposed to more news, more media, more everything. Just everything is we're exposed to everything unlike we were when we were children.
Absolutely. 24/7 news, 24/7 social media. I mean, it's nice that everybody has a voice, but at the same time, every little micro opinion on things, that's what adds to this divide, because everybody seems to have one or another opinion, but not a lot of individual opinions, if you know what I'm saying.
Group
It seems like everybody wants to join one club or another, and I've never been that person. I couldn't stay in Boy Scouts long because I just felt like this. Once you get in groups of more than 3 people, to me, it becomes a corporation or some kind of nightmare scenario. So I love humans individually. I know I've heard George say this as well. But once you get into a group where it becomes a corporation, a government system, some kind of club or another, most of them, I mean, there are always exceptions, of course, but most of them turn out to be something where now the individualism has been destroyed and turned into some kind of, I don't know, where everybody's just kind of going along for the ride and afraid to even speak their real mind,
Exactly. And then you pile on the, our group is the best. And if you're not in our group, you're this most hateful thing in the world.
Absolutely. That's the most appalling thing to me, because there are beautiful people on both sides, of everything. I don't care what it is, whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about AI, anything. There's every single issue that comes out now, it seems, not the allegations, the confession from Mr. Nirvana, David Grohl. The confession from David Grohl. I mean, all of a sudden everybody's got an opinion about him and is self-righteous about it. I'm like, that's his personal life. I feel bad because people at that level of fame kind of have to have that. He had to do that preemptive strike publicly because he knew it was going to come out, and but I mean, leave his business to himself. You're there for his music if you're a fan, as far as I'm concerned,
Exactly. Back to your new album, I feel like there's a story behind the cover with the glowing red lights repeated over and over again, and sort of like the 70s throwback logo.
Yes, exactly. So that Amygdala logo, I was looking for stuff that was kind of in that disco, kind of making it almost, I don't know. To me, it looked like futuristic, but also retro at the same time. The cover art itself was done by a really good friend of mine who's done a lot of my cover art, Christian Carew, Andres' brother, actually. And he's an excellent photographer, and he does a lot of this post, editing work on his art that's just always it's just amazing looking to me. And when I saw that image, I'm like, that has to be one of our album covers. And then you had to find a font that would work with that, because, you know, it's got you can't just put any kind of lettering over that. It's going to be very difficult to read. So I found that perfect, big, you know, old 70s, almost disco font. I kind of love that.
I noticed you have another release out under Love in Reverse on Bandcamp. It's called Lost and Found. It came out on August 16th, kind of around the release of this album. Why don't you tell me about that release?
Actually, that one I just put out on Bandcamp. It's been on streaming since 2015. So Lost and Found has it's a collection of demos plus the song Words Become Worms, which was originally recorded for the album Words Become Worms, our last Warner Brothers record. But it's an 18-minute piece of music that when I present, this is one of the reasons we ended up parting ways with Warner Brothers, probably the main reason. They assigned us an A&R person. I walked into this woman's room, really nice person, really wanted to champion us, but didn't get our music at all. In fact, I knew we were in trouble when I saw her collection, where the coolest album, in my humble opinion, on her whole wall was the Ambrosia album. I was like, we're in trouble, man. She doesn't like cutting edge music. She's a big, you know, like almost easy listening music fan. And I was like, but it's really important to me as an A&R person. You have to get the band's music, right? I mean, if you're selling a so-called product, you should believe in that so-called product. You know what I mean? And so, yeah. So once I saw her reaction to the album, I was like, I'm just gonna leave that song off of this, because if they don't get the rest of the album, they're gonna probably shelve this if they hear this 18-minute, really kind of futuristic mix of ambience, noise, and for 1997 at the time when we recorded it, you know, it was pretty out there.
So where you had the difficult A&R person, was it difficult making the Words Become Worms album back in 1998?
It wasn't difficult to make it at all. In fact, the great thing about that album was that after doing 2 albums with Russ Titleman, we did an EP and an album with Russ Titleman, who was the producer of Eric Clapton. He won a Grammy for Tears in Heaven and that record. He also was behind Chaka Khan, Ricky Lee Jones. And we wanted somebody that was kind of old school and an outsider. We wanted to either have him or Tony Visconti. We had talked to both of them. So Tony Visconti, as a lot of your people know, you know, David Bowie, Mark Bolan, and T-Rex are probably the 2 biggest things he's done. So we wanted someone like that got that old world, but that would allow us to explore the future of music. And Russ was really cool, and we totally hit it off with him. So we did those 2 albums, but then he wasn't available to do the next one. And we convinced the label to, instead of paying all the money that we pay to a producer, why don't you give us that production money so we can buy a studio? We bought our own home studio. We spent like 70 grand, built this soup to nuts amazing ADAT studio, or DA88 studio at the time, which is now obsolete. But at that time, it was like we were in heaven. We went to Sam Ash and literally, you know, had the record labels money for the day back when you could do those kind of things. And, you know, had our studio, and we made several albums in there even after we, you know, disbanded from the label.
You mentioned John Zazula earlier as your manager back at that time. Marsha as well, I believe.
Yes.
Was Megaforce part of the label, or was that like an outside thing where they were managing you?
No, so at the point when they were managing us, I think they had already sold, or they were in the midst of selling Megaforce to one of their former employees. Took it over. A woman named Missy Colazzo, who we were really good friends with there as well. And she took that over. They kind of focused on crazed management at that time. And they were managing like Biff Naked, Ministry, Love in Reverse, and a few other artists at that time. I think they were even talking about maybe managing James Brown for a moment there. And for whatever reason, that didn't work out.
Since the Lost and Found release on Bandcamp is an archival release, Are you putting out other archival release on your Bandcamp page? Because I found several others.
Oh yeah. There's tons of archival stuff on my Love and Reverse page, my solo page, Michael Ferentino page. Also, I do stuff under Bedtime for Robots. And in fact, I have a few like indie net labels now putting out the Bedtime for Robots stuff. One out of Vancouver, one out of Brazil. Church of Noisy Goat out of Brazil. Mist label out of Vancouver. And then Dada Drumming is the main label that I put most of my stuff out. This is a guy from Texas. I actually went to high school with him, and he started this noise label like 25 years ago. And he wanted to expand into other types of music besides just straight up noise. And, you know, he likes that I'm also really into experimental kind of stuff. So, but he also wanted to have some of our melodic stuff. So he's kind of taken over, and he put out the Amygdala album, and he'll be putting out the next one, Keep Upright, as well.
Bedtime for Robots is completely different than Love and Reverse. It's more atmospheric, dark, soundtracky stuff, right?
Yeah, all instrumental for the most part. I mean, there are some things where I actually cross-pollinate and bring Love and Reverse in. So I do some of the vocal parts, or Andres does some stuff on it. But most of Bedtime for Robots is just me and electronics and guitars as well. A lot of manipulation, music, concrete, found sounds, and, you know, like environmental sounds, things like that. Sounds of my wife cooking in the kitchen. I capture that and use that as well.
What is the most current release for Bedtime for Robots?
So right now, the most recent that's in all the streaming media would be an album called Chloroform Days, which is really out there experimental stuff. A lot of it with beats and whatnot. Some of it is more noisy and dark, almost like horror movie soundtrack vibes. Then there's a triple album, which is being released in 3 separate parts. The first 2 have been released right now, one on the Mist label, because it's really space ambient, almost like really early Tangerine Dream meets some of that krautrock stuff from that same era, like Klaus Schultz and things like that. And then the second one is more of a noise album with guitar noise and synth noise. And then the third one is called the Dystopian Rhythm Machine. That hasn't come out yet, but that one is all like crazy futuristic beats and synths and stuff. Pretty wild stuff, pretty out there.
I saw a compilation for a band which I'm assuming is from your early like pre-everything days, Corduroy Poo-Poo.
So no, actually Corduroy Poo-Poo, which just came out today, the complete album, was while we were getting ready to record the first 2 Love and Reverse albums. We had just been signed to Warner's. I had a lot of time in between because Andres had to set up a lot of the programming parts of that, because we used a lot of drum machines and things on that record. So he was doing the programming part, and I had, you know, we had basically quit our day jobs at that time once we signed with them. And I had about a month to do nothing, and I'm manic all the time. So I literally got together with 2 of my buds, one of my brothers from Brazil named Sergio Ferreira, and my brother from the Bronx, Teno Andra. And the 3 of us got a 4-track cassette recorder that we had been doing demos with from the time, like since the late 80s, that Andres and I had used. We got a $15 Radio Shack microphone covered in a wool sock, a broken guitar effects pedal board, and a bass guitar. And we recorded an album's worth of material in 1995. And then we revisited it again while we were working on the Words Become Worms album, when I got kicked out of the studio for a while so Andres could do his programming part, because he puts a lot of effort and time into all that stuff. So while he was doing that, I was like, I got another month off here. I'm going to make another album. And that's what we did.
Well, then you got another one coming on September 20th, Transfusion M, Slaughterhouse 25.
Yes, so Transfusion M, this is an interesting story too. So you got to be familiar with Jason Corsaro. He's the guy that first started out as a mixing engineer for most of the Duran Duran albums. Madonna's Like a Virgin, Cyndi Lauper. He did a lot of that stuff, but then he won a Grammy for the engineering of Soundgarden's Super Unknown. And then he did a bunch of Clutch albums. And he actually, we picked him as the mixing engineer on Words Become Worms, because the album had so many tracks and so many layers that Andres and I were both, all right, we got the recording done. I don't know that we felt at that time, we were still new to that level of recording. We didn't feel confident about mixing it yet at that point. So we're like, let's get somebody really good, really savvy. We were both fans of all of his work. He sent us a tape of what he was up to at that time. And I was amazed that he was looking to work with us and we were looking to work with him at the same time. And it was just like magic. We all got together. And then we became friends up until he passed away, unfortunately. But Jason and I, at one point when it was years had gone by, I was like around 2004, 2005, he wanted to make another record with me. I was doing some solo stuff, but nothing like where I was really, you know, focused on anything other than Bedtime for Robots at that time. And he was like, let's make an album of songs like what you do with Love in Reverse, but something new, something different. So we got together, we got signed to this indie deal. In this amazing church, we recorded our first album, Transfusion M, Suck Century, in 2004. That came out in 2006. And then ever since then, whenever I do solo stuff that is kind of more in the vein of, you know, guitar oriented, maybe even some electronics in there as well, I always kind of use that moniker again. So this will be the 4th Transfusion M album coming out next week. Yeah, week from today.
This one's a rock opera?
This one is, yeah, you could call it that in a way. It's a concept album. I wouldn't call it a rock opera. Each song is individual, kind of like very influenced by stuff like The Who, but I'm going to say more like Who's Next than like Tommy or Quadrophenia. So Who's Next, apparently, I understand, was supposed to be a concept album, and then they ended up going with all these individual songs. Also a little Queensryche kind of dystopian, sort of like in that Rage for Order, one of my favorite records of all time. So a little influence of that in the lyrics. But the music is a little more punky, but with big harmonies, almost like if you took the Beach Boys, Depeche Mode, and I don't know, some kind of post-punk thing and mangled it all together with heavy guitars. That's the album.
Do you know Dave Brenner over at Earsplit PR? Because you guys do a lot of the similar music, a lot of the same stuff. He's into the noise and the experimental stuff and things.
I don't know him. No, I know who they are. I know the company, but I don't know him personally. No.
Yeah, he's got a record label too that he puts out his stuff on, and I feel like you guys might be a good collaboration.
Oh, that would be cool. I would love to do something with somebody like that.
I think he's based in New York.
Cool. Actually, Greg, the guy who runs Dada Drumming, he just goes by Greg. He's also a noise artist himself. And just recently, I gave him a bunch of guitar tracks for him to manipulate. So we're going to be doing this as a collaboration. It's going to be under his band, A Foul Association, or his project, A Foul Association / I think he's putting it out as just Foul Association featuring MICHAEL Ferentino kind of thing. But that one was kind of fun to work with too.
Have you always been this creative when it comes to making music, or was it the lockdowns that spawned just so much music material all of a sudden?
No, not at all. The lockdowns was a nice opportunity for me because, you know, working full time in the medical field, it gave me I was on furlough for about 3 months. So during that period, yes, I wrote a shit ton of music and did a lot. But I'm going to say this goes back as far as 1988 when I bought my first 4-track cassette-based recorder. I've recorded between then and now about 130 plus albums worth of material of all different types of projects. And then some, now I'm trying to get all of them out there. There's a certain amount of things that I just, you know, I consider them kind of crap and I never want them to be heard. So those things get buried. I was telling one of my friends recently, for every song that I write and love, there's usually 1 or 2 that get canned. You know what I mean?
It's a lot easier today versus 1989 to get your music out there and heard with streaming media, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, you can actually do this as a hobby, have fun doing it. You don't have to worry about making money to make a record anymore. I mean, I know that some people still spend money on it, but I basically do this for free now. I do most of my recordings based on iPad. Then I send a lot of that stuff to Andres when we're working on the Love and Reverse stuff together. He uses, I believe he's using the Mac-based recording program, whatever the hell that is. I don't use any PC stuff anymore. So everything I'm doing is iPad, 100%.
GarageBand?
No, I actually use a thing called Chord Gadget, which I think is amazing. And the way that works, if anybody's ever interested in such a thing, it works similar to the format of like video editing. So it's in frames almost. So it's in tracks, but it's also in instruments are separated out. So the instruments are vertical and then the tracks are horizontal. And each instrument is considered a gadget, and you can go and purchase them one at a time. And when I tell you, they've really got some of these vintage synthesizers and drum machines down to a science. Then they have guitar pedals. They have what do you call it? Guitar emulators. I mean, so many different things. Samplers, blah blah blah. And I've, over the past 5 years, I've accumulated quite a collection of their gadgets. So I have like so many things at my disposal now. And then I found a lot of interesting techniques to mess with the program to almost make it sound more analog, like I used to do on the 4-track recordings. So you can kind of play around with the algorithms that they set for the way everything's done in almost like beats and measures, but you can trick that if you want to. So I kind of do that a lot as well.
We've talked about Love and Reverse and Corduroy Poo-Poo and Transfusion M and Bedtime for Robots. Is there any other release you have coming out soon?
So just under my own name, Michael Ferentino, I have an album called Concrete Platform Shoes coming out the second week of October. And this one it's just a really out there experimental album that combines, I'm going to say, the spirit of the early mothers of invention mixed with the spirit of some of that really experimental stuff PIL was doing in the early days. And then there's stuff I actually, there's a part where I actually do a rap on the album, and I'm doing it by conjuring the spirit of Andy Kaufman. So there's a lot of odd stuff on this record. There's a surprise around every corner, and it's broken up into 9 parts, just called Concrete Platform Shoes 1 through 9. And each part has multiple songs within the part. So it's pretty wild. It's crazy stuff.
Do you ever get out to perform live anymore, or is just everything in studio?
No, I'm 100% studio these days. I used to, when we were doing it as a band, I absolutely loved it. But that, just to go out and try to do this stuff, in Tampa, let's say, even, I don't know. I just don't have the interest in doing it anymore. I love the studio. I love recording and writing and creating music. But to just go and try to recreate these crazy, multi-track recordings live, it's going to be just me and an acoustic guitar or using drum machines. To me, that's not really a live performance. When I was working with my boys, it was great because the drummer was playing a real drum kit and triggering stuff for samples and things like that. My bass player was playing bass and keyboards, and we all sang, and it was a real live performance. None of that stuff was some of it was programmed, but you had to trigger it and really play these parts. Nothing was done on tape, so we didn't do that at all. And to me, that's a live performance. I don't want to get into this. Everything's on tape, and now I'm just singing on top of a tape. But you might as well just buy the album then. or stream the album, rent it, whatever you do these days.
So if I wanted to check out everything that you had as far as music material, is there a singular place I would go, or are there multiple places I have to go to check out Love and Reverse or Bedtime for Robots and all the other projects?
Right. That's a good question. So the best way I've found, and I don't know how good the algorithms are on Apple and everything else, but I use Spotify. I know they're the demons out there, but you know what? They're no more demons than any of the other ones, because YouTube actually pays artists less than all of them. And so does Deezer. pays less than Spotify. So yes, I think that a lot of work needs to be done in these streaming worlds, but that's another story. But Spotify, one thing that I've noticed that's really cool about the way that works is if you click on one of them, it'll say people also liked, and all of my projects are under there. So that's a fast way to get to all of them. And what I'm doing now also is I'm cross-pollinating some of the stuff like Transfusion M, my solo stuff, Corduroy Poo-Poo, things like that. Some of the off projects are all under my name as well. So it'll be the band, comma, Michael Ferentino. So it's easier to find. But I didn't want to do that with Love in Reverse because that's really not just me. That's all three of us. And I didn't want to do, there's also Amazing Meat Project. There's 2 full albums out there. You'd probably be, knowing your taste in music, you'd probably be into those. They're really like melodic, straight up rock album. The second album called Homeless Music. And the first one is almost like a T-Rex meets Prince kind of vibe called Undrugged. And that came out in 1999.
I will have to check that out.
Cool. Yeah. So you can find all that stuff through Spotify easily. I mean, it's on all the streaming sites, but yeah, it's hard to find a one-stop shop when you have so many different projects. I would like to do a website at some point. I did have one at one time, but honestly, all the newer algorithms for creating websites have been, I don't know, painful to me. And I don't want to spend so much time on a computer. That's why I'm a terrible marketer. I'm terrible at marketing myself. I spend so much time just making new music that, most people would say, you put out so much music, how's anybody going to be able to hear this? I kind of don't care. if you find it and you like it, thank you. I appreciate it. I really do. If you share it, I appreciate it, but I'm going to do it either way. So if it's going to be done just here in my house and I'm going to collect it on CDs, I might as well put it out there.
Good philosophy.
Yeah, it's my therapy.
Well, Michael, those are all the questions I have for you today. The new Love in Reverse album. Nope, you're going to have to tell me the title again.
Amygdala.
Amygdala is out now through Dada Drumming Records, and obviously Bedtime for Robots is out there. Corduroy Poo-Poo, Transfusion M. By the time this interview comes out, it will be out as well. So always a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, George. I appreciate you.
Once again, I want to thank Michael Ferentino of Love in Reverse, Bedtime for Robots, Corduroy Poo-Poo, Transfusion M, and other projects for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out the latest Love in Reverse album, Amygdala, out now through Dada Drumming Records. Head over to your favorite music streaming platform. Take a listen to all the material that Michael has available through his various projects. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy where it's available. Support the artist. For all things Love in Reverse, head over to their official Facebook page /Love in Reverse Band. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. Discover your next favorite artist on the Rock